don't just take things for what they are at face value. When you see someone excited about it online, or your influencer or whatever, like learn the science and you're gonna go much, much deeper, much, much further. And then being skeptical, because at the end of the day, look, science is always evolving. Not everything you see is true. So be a scientist, run experiments, treat yourself like your own N of 1 clinical trial, but be responsible. Ask for help, work with mentors, work with a great coach or consultant or doctor. Just have like a team of people that isn't just telling you what to do, but it's showing you how it works and how it works for you specifically, and you're going to be way ahead of the curve. There's all this amazing substance out there that anyone can gain something from. Huberman podcast, Know Your Physio podcast, there's endless content on Google, ChatGPT, right? But here's the thing, none of those creators, none of the content out there, all of that is missing one essential prerequisite for your optimal health journey, and it's your context. The content's out there, but your context isn't. So if you can learn about your context, your physiology, or work with someone that can help you make sense of your context and how the content fits into it, that's what's going to take you to that next level. Unless you do that, you're not going to be, you simply, by definition, you're not going to have optimal health, because optimal health is totally personal to the individual. It's completely subjective. It's completely specific to that person, their lifestyle, their goals, their DNA.
What works for me might not work for you.
It will not. It's not that it might not. It will not work under ideal conditions for optimal health. If you want to standardize our well-being and performance, and then it's mediocre at best. So if you want to go to that next level over the top, you have to get to know your science and your context and your lifestyle and how it all fits into the big picture.
Can you explain VO2 max to me?
Yeah. So you probably know that it's the most highly correlated metric with longevity.
Yes.
And there's a reason. So plain and simply, it's like your maximum oxygen consumption per unit of time. But if I break down the equation for you, you'll be able to wrap your head around it. So there's something called the Fick equation, F-I-C-K. And the way that it describes VO2 max is equal to cardiac output, which is basically your stroke volume times your heart rate. Stroke volume is how much blood leaves the heart with every heartbeat. Heart rate, heart rate.
Of course.
You multiply the two, now you have how much blood is leaving the heart every minute. And then you multiply that by something called the VO2 difference. So the difference in oxygen saturation between atrial and venous blood. So basically, how much oxygen did your tissues absorb? So you're multiplying how much total blood volume is leaving the heart every minute, and then of that blood volume, how much oxygen am I absorbing from that blood? So how much can I scavenge? How effective is my body at taking oxygen from the blood? So now you have your maximum oxygen consumption. And the number one way to increase VO2 max is by focusing in on the stroke volume component. So like the number one variable of everything that I just mentioned that increases the VO2 max is the stroke volume. Because you can change via exercise how hard the heart contracts, and therefore how much blood is leaving the heart every minute. And HIIT training is the best way to do that. So training in intervals so you can replenish creatine between sets, and every subsequent set of exercise you can have increased or at least high maintenance of high intensities.
So is that the reason why creatine is so beneficial, especially in terms of training HIIT?
Yeah.
Where it's like you can keep that output going for longer?
Because you'll be able to go harder, replenish quicker between sets, because ultimately the intensity of exercise is mediated by creatine for the highest intensities. It's the fastest way to generate ATP, but after about 20, maybe 30 seconds, you've depleted 90% of it. Now energy starts to drop. So something that we'll get to on the podcast is substrate utilization and like how all these different substrates work together to maintain a certain level of intensity. But creatine it's interesting because it's like a very explosive. And I don't want to give you the analogy just yet because it's a great analogy that'll help you wrap your head around this. And I want to get your reaction on the spot. But it's definitely going to be illuminating you know, in terms of like wrapping your head around how all these things work together and how they can support VO2 max training and quality of life.
Can you talk a little bit about ATP too? People get so confused when they hear ATP.
Yeah. What about it?
What is it?
Adenosine triphosphate.
Yeah.
It's
maybe how it works in the body as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's how your body, it's like the energy currency of your body. You know, it's like we pay for things in our day-to-day with money. Our body pays energetic demands with ATP. It's like an energy currency. I mean, how deep do you want me to go on?
I want you to go deep, baby.
Really deep?
Yeah, let's go.
You know, in our day-to-day, to get by, we exchange money, you know. In our body, the currency that we use to make ends meet is ATP. And when a cell needs energy, it will basically split, you know, adenosine triphosphate into energy and adenosine diphosphate. And there's a number of different substrates or fuels that the body can use to generate ATP. And they are creatine, glucose, ketones, fatty acids, and amino acids.
Wow, I didn't know creatine was one of those.
Yeah, and it's the most immediate way to generate ATP. But after, you know, when you do like an all-out effort, you know, like 90% plus intensity, after about 20 to 30 seconds, you've depleted most of that creatine, and now you start to like downshift into using more glucose, you know, for fuel, so glycolysis, right? And then beta oxidation of fat. At any given moment, even right now, even though we're not engaged in a high intensity effort, we're still using all four of these substrates. But depending on the level of intensity and the duration, we're going to use typically one more than the rest. So if I get up right now and I start sprinting, I'm going to shift into primarily creatine until after about 20 or 30 seconds, I've depleted most of it. Now my energy levels, my intensity is going to have to climb down, and I'm going to be using more, you know, glucose for fuel. So the analogy I wanted to give you earlier, this is an incredible analogy. It really, it's great. Imagine that you have like a bonfire, right? And there's different things that you can add to the fire to get that flame going, right? There's a very immediate way, which is pouring gasoline on it, right? You take some gasoline, you pour it on the fire, and it explodes, but it's very short lasting, right? It explodes. And then, you know, after you see this massive explosion, you probably have to run back inside, grab some more creatine, in this case, more gasoline, and pour it on the fire, right? Whereas, you know, what most people use for a fire, the most efficient fuel source for a fire is just wood, right? Chop some wood, you toss it in the fire, you can have a nice stack of wood there by your fire, and it'll last you the whole night, right? But then what happens after you exhaust your wood? Well, guess what? Now you have these embers, and those embers will last, right? And sometimes you'll wake up the next day in the morning and you still have that ember going, and you can blow on that ember and you can get that fire going and bring more fire, you know, whatever, right? So if it's not already clear for the people tuning in, you know, creatine is like that gasoline. It's explosive, but it's short-lived. Glucose, the most efficient, but you have a limited amount, right? So we store glucose as a glycogen, and we can store about, call it like 500 grams in the body. Mostly is, you know, most of that's stored in your muscle mass, about 400 of those 500 grams. Another 90 grams or so in the liver, and then 5 to 10 grams in the blood. And, you know, when you do like a moderate intensity exercise, you're depleting about, you know, 1 to 1.5 grams of glycogen per minute. So, you know, you've depleted most of your liver glycogen after about an hour and a half, and then yeah, I mean, the idea is you want to go into exercise with some amount of glycogen. You deplete it, and then you replenish with food, you know, or via gluconeogenesis. So in the absence of glucose, if you're, let's say, you're on a ketogenic diet, or you're fasted, or whatever, you're glycogen deprived, then gluconeogenesis means things other than glucose being converted into glucose. A lot of people, and this is something that we can get into later, if you chronically underconsume carbohydrate and you exercise a lot, like a lot of people nowadays are like carb phobic, which is a big problem because they have their longevity and high performance goals. They don't realize that carbohydrate is like the number one fuel source for engaging in the kind of activity you want to do to support your longevity, you know?
Totally.
And so basically what I was going to say was, in my case, there was an instance where I was chronically under-consuming the carbs. I was fasting a lot. I was training a lot. I got blood work done, and I realized my sex hormone binding globulin was high and my free testosterone was low because my body was under this like perceived stress. You know, it was like going too hard and it didn't have the right substrate. So the idea is, I mean, look, you want to have glucose, you want to consume carbohydrate, it converts to glucose, store it as glycogen. But yeah, you store 500 grams. So after a few hours of exercise, you've depleted it. But what you have virtually unlimited access to, like unlimited amount of energy that you can derive from is fat. You know, you and I right now, believe it or not, we have about 100,000 calories stored as fat in our body right now.
100,000?
Yeah. Wow. If not more. Yeah. Think about that, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah. So beta oxidation of fat, that's how we actually break down fat and turn it into ATP, is beta oxidation. And it's a very slow process, but it's like, it lasts forever in the sense that you have like unlimited fat.
Does someone doing keto have more fat than someone who's eating maybe a diet like we are?
They don't have more fat, but they can most likely, under normal conditions, more readily convert fat into ketones and use them as a fuel source.
How do you feel about that diet in general?
The ketogenic diet? My thoughts right now, because you know, when I first started to apply science and help, you know, patients and clients to live longer, live better. At the time, I was working with a doctor, interventional radiologist, and we had a whole, you know, lifestyle medicine program. You know, our target audience was folks that wanted to revert disease like cardiometabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes. They wanted to lose some fat, and that, you know, at that point in time, I was a huge fan of the ketogenic diet, and I think it works well for some people to lose weight. I mean, here's the thing: is restricting anything in your diet is going to most likely lead to weight loss. And if you restrict an entire macronutrient, in this case carbohydrate, any kind of restriction, most people are going to lose weight. They're going to lose fat. So, for example, right, like intermittent fasting, it's not magic. Like people lose weight on intermittent fasting because they're restricting their feeding window. Ketogenic diet, you're restricting down to 2 macronutrients, protein and carbohydrate and fat. Right, like that's how it works.
It makes sense logically that you would lose weight.
Yeah, but the point is that there are therapeutic benefits to the ketogenic diet outside of the weight loss that it can, you know, influence. And, you know, for example, we know that shifting in and out of ketosis, there's something in the body, it's called the intermittent metabolic switch. So going from a glucose, primarily, you know, glucose or fed state into a ketogenic state, whether it's fasting or a fasting mimicking diet like the keto diet, you see all these amazing benefits like increased neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, prevention of disease, longevity. So because the human body, the way that we're designed is we're designed to go days, sometimes weeks without food. And, you know, these are all evolutionarily preserved mechanisms. Like, you know, fasting and ketogenic diet, they give you all these amazing benefits, but it's not magic. It's we're tapping into a way of life that we evolved with. Nowadays, we eat all the time whenever we want because we can. Doesn't mean that we should. And so fasting or fasting mimicking diet, ketogenic diet, it can help elicit some of these benefits. The thing about keto and how I feel about it today, I mean, I don't really work. So let me put it like this. As you can tell, I have mixed feelings about it because I think it can work really well. What I don't like about it is that it will ultimately take away from the energy that you need to do the kind of activity at the level of intensity that promotes longevity, as I mentioned earlier, you know, to increase VO2 max and to help you increase muscle fiber. You know, we know, for example, that if you're chronically under-consuming carbs, outside of the issues that I mentioned on my, personally, well, now all of a sudden you break down muscle fiber, you have to replenish it, but now you don't have the substrate that helps to replenish it, which is the most efficient. And on top of that, you don't have a lot of volume in the muscle because most of the volume in your muscle is water. As I mentioned, you store about 400, those 500 grams of glycogen in muscle. Every gram of glycogen is associated with about 3.5 grams of water. So basically, a normal standard diet, you have way more volume in the muscle, and that creates more swelling, which is related to more anabolic environment post-training as well. That swelling leads to a little bit of that beneficial inflammation to drive hypertrophy or muscle growth. So it's like you don't have the energy to do the exercise you need to do for longevity. You're not going to have energy in general because, I mean, you can get adapted, sure, but you're generally going to be lower in energy because deriving energy from fat is just a slower process. And you don't have the volume that you need to fucking look amazing and to support, another mechanism for hypertrophy, for muscle growth. So unless you're like an elite endurance athlete, or you are a very obese person that can't exercise and you're a very sedentary person, then in that case you can follow a ketogenic diet and great. But in most cases I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, I guess I could see it in the use case, as you said, someone who's obese and maybe sedentary to use it to get to a certain point.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, maybe now we start incorporating carbohydrates, obviously good quality carbohydrates, but.
Yeah. And another analogy that I can give you for carbohydrate, because, people, especially online, there's so many mixed feelings about carbs. And over the past years, I think that we've seen enough carb phobia.
Oh, yeah.
And I just...
You still hear it?
Yeah.
I'm not eating carbs right now. It's like...
Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm just restricting carbs. Like, I'm low carb diet. Like, I used to be all about that as well. And now I think it comes down to eating the right amount and the right glycemic index when it's appropriate. So the analogy I'll give you, I'll start with this. To make the most of carbohydrates, you want to match the amount and the glycemic index to the amount of activity that you're doing and the proximity to exercise, respectively. So
in terms of before and after exercise?
So yes, what I'm saying here is like the more active you are, generally the more carbohydrate you can afford to consume without any issues. So to keep your blood glucose level steady, you're a very active dude, have more carbs, right? And now the closer that you are to exercise, meaning like, let's say I'm going to go and exercise in 30 minutes, right? Because I could take advantage of a high glycemic index carbohydrate, meaning it breaks up readily my blood glucose. It spikes my glucose very quickly. That's high glycemic index. I could take advantage of that and use it as a fuel source. So I could take advantage of that high, right? And then immediately, or even during activity, I can quite literally consume sugar, like straight sugar, a glycemic index of 100. And I will use it in that moment. Plus, I take advantage of chemoreceptors in my mouth that respond to glucose, the presence of glucose, and will give me energy. It's a psychological kind of hack. You can actually just swish around carbs in your mouth.
Really?
Activate chemoreceptors.
Without swallowing it?
Yeah, and it gives you energy because your body's under the impression that it's about to receive it, and it just like rewards you with this like surge in energy. But anyway, you can still drink it.
It's like a gambling addict sitting down at a craps table. The dopamine starts flying before they even play.
Exactly. Yes.
Wow.
Exactly. So yeah, you can take advantage of that high glycemic index, and then post-exercise, you've contracted all this muscle fiber, your insulin sensitivity, which is a storage hormone, it takes nutrients from food and dumps it into the cell. Insulin sensitivity is super high after exercise. You could take advantage of that. You could eat anything sweet, and it's not going to make a dent in your blood glucose levels.
Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
I played pickleball this morning for like an hour and a half. Came back, had some Greek yogurt with a lot of honey and some blueberries. Great post-meal, right?
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, and honey doesn't have, I could be wrong here, so fact check me, but I don't think it has as high of a glycemic index as most people would think.
But to go back, so post and pre, high glycemic index.
Yeah, so like I said, you want to match the glycemic index to proximity to exercise. So the closer you are to exercise, the higher glycemic index you can afford. You're not going to have lentils before exercise. Bro, try having lentils before exercise. Your body's going to go, whoa, dude, a lot of fiber here, a lot of protein we need to break down. We're going to suck and siphon blood away from the extremities, the arms and legs and the head, the brain, and we're going to dump that into the digestive tract to help us break down this food. And now you're going to feel sluggish and tired, and you're going to feel like there's knot in your stomach because you're redirecting blood flow because you need a lot of attention to digest very difficult, high fiber food.
Totally.
Food. So whereas on a rest day, you're not doing any activity, so therefore you're not really tapping into glycogen, or you don't need to tap into glycogen. You don't need, that substrate availability. There isn't as much of a demand there. So the point is to keep your glucose level steady, bro. Have some lentils, have some beans, have some quinoa.
On your day off.
Yeah. Because they're going to break down more slowly, and they have a lower glycemic index. You can just keep your glucose levels pretty flatline, or stable. I don't want to say flatline, stable. And now you have, very consistent energy, focus, productivity throughout the day. Because on a rest day, if you have these super sweet foods, what happens? Your glycemic index, the glycemic index is super high, so the glucose levels in your blood will skyrocket. Your body is not designed, after millions of years of evolution, processed food has been part of our, timeline for only for a blip in the timeline, right?
Yeah,
we're not designed to process these foods. They're so processed, and we're not designed to handle that. So what happens is you fire off insulin. So now insulin goes skyrockets to try to break down all this and dump all this glucose into the cell. But typically you overproduce insulin, and now your blood glucose levels go below baseline. So basically, imagine this is a graph, right? So this is glycemic index or glucose, and this is time. You have something you're just taking a chill rest day. You're not doing any activity. You introduce, call it sugar, skyrocket glucose, tons of insulin, dumps it away. Now, below baseline, hypoglycemia. What is this? Why is this a bad thing? Because hypoglycemia is going to make you feel cranky. It's going to lead to impulsive behaviors and desire for food. You're going to be, you can experience brain fog, like irritability, hunger, like basically your body's like, whoa, like we need to do whatever it takes as quickly as possible to get us back to baseline fast, right? And so what's your body going to desire? It's not going to desire fucking lentils. Lentils aren't going to get you there quickly.
Give me that sugar, baby.
More sugar. So now you're like, hey, I'm down here. Let me get way back up. More sugar. But then you overshoot it again. And it's like this like roller coaster of blood glucose. Good luck, good luck stabilizing that again.
Totally.
In an intuitive way that actually agrees with your health and your performance goals. So it's like if you start the day with something that has a low glycemic index, something that's very satiating, has protein, has fiber, breaks up more slowly, then now you get the best of both worlds. You get sustained energy for the day according to the demands that you're exerting that day, and you feel good.
Absolutely.
So
that's what we want.
So yeah. So anyway, going back to this very simple and valuable understanding of carbohydrate. You're not going to do much activity. Just go lower carb, lower amount, and lower glycemic index. Perfect. You're getting ready to exercise. Okay. Have a moderate glycemic index carbohydrate. If you have, let's say, 2 to 3 hours before you train, eat some potatoes. Super starchy, converts to glycogen like so well. A lot of people fear starchy carbs. A lot of we've demonized starchy carbs. I love starchy carbs, bro. Dude,
best.
It's like yuca, plantains, potatoes, sweet potato. Like, bro, are you kidding me?
How do you feel about rice?
Rice is also a very starchy carb. It's great, but again, like these are now like moderate glycemic index carbohydrates. They're perfectly fine. They're perfectly healthy. But if you're not moving your body, it's too much. If you're not moving your body, they're going to convert readily to glycogen. But guess what? If you have if you saturate your glycogen stores, where does all that extra carbohydrate go? Gets converted into intramuscular triglyceride, which is a very fancy way of saying fat in the muscle. And that fat in the muscle interferes with insulin sensitivity. It interferes with leptin sensitivity. Leptin is a hormone that regulates your body weight set point. And it's supposed to increase in relation to the amount of triglyceride that you have. But in this modern day, dude, we're so bad. Like, we overconsume foods and we have such highly processed foods that triglycerides skyrocket, and now it makes it very difficult for leptin to be as sensitive as it needs to be to regulate our appetite. And it can create this vicious cycle of obesity where you don't have the signal that you need to understand when to stop eating and where your body weight set point is. Like, triglyceride interferes with the leptin signaling, is what I meant to say. So yeah, like, triglycerides skyrocket, leptin is all messed up. It's just like a bad cycle.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. You said it. That's why we see what's going on in the country right now.
Yeah,
a lot of people, they're not set up for success, right? But when you understand these things, it gives you the tools to actually put yourself in the right position.
Yeah, I think it gives you the tools, the motivation, and the inspiration. When you realize that these are all levers that are built into your body that have been evolutionarily preserved. Like, we're simply in an environment, this modern environment, living a modern life where we get what we want when we want it, but our body doesn't respond positively to that. Like, if we can understand what's happening in our body, then we can respect it. I mean, like, if you make the changes, just carbohydrate alone, if you just adjust that based on what I'm telling you, you'll notice benefits within the day.
Oh yeah.
You'll feel better, more energized, less irritable, just better. And it's not magic. Like, all these health hacks, all this applied science, it's not magic. You're just simply living a more biologically consistent life.
Yeah, how we were intended to live.
Yeah, in the modern day, and you're going to have an advantage over most people.
Yeah.
And not to say that this is about getting an advantage over somebody. It's just like most people don't have the chance to appreciate these things.
Yeah.
And so if you do, you will perform higher. You will live a better life. You will be a more positive person because you're abiding by your body's laws.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that every person wants to feel as good as they could possibly feel while they're having this experience.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to feel good every day?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's a privilege, but it's not that difficult to tap into that clarity and that energy. It's a few adjustments, and most of them are free.
Yeah. Which is the best part.
Yeah.
I got 2 questions for you now after going off of that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about fasted training and rest days?
Yeah. Okay. So, 2 loaded questions.
Very loaded questions.
But I'll tell you what I think. Fasted training. I train fasted nowadays. It's my preference. Not to say that it's the best, but it's my preference. But here's the thing about fasted training, and this is where we get into the weeds of things. You might be fasted, but your glycogen saturation, your glycogen stores, that's a totally separate thing. Like how do I put this? Let's say for dinner last night, let's say all of yesterday I carb loaded up, right? I ate a ton of potatoes, rice, and now my glycogen stores are saturated. This morning, I'm technically fasted, haven't had breakfast, but, dude, I've got my glycogen stores. They're there. I'll perform, right? Very different from, glycogen depletion, waking up fasted. Now I'm
And what would that look like? Maybe you didn't eat you stopped eating the day before at 12 o'clock. Could that produce that?
So, if you haven't had very much to eat the day before, when you wake up, you're going to be in a deep ketogenic state, and you're not going to have the substrate availability to perform at a higher level. You're not going to have the carbs, like the glycogen. It's not going to be there. But a lot of athletes, what they do before a competition is they will do typically a 2-week carb loading cycle where like they train for the first week, they train with very low carbohydrate, and they basically increase the demand for carbohydrate, and they sensitize their insulin, and they basically build their body in a way that it can scavenge carbohydrate a lot better for like a week. So they train low carb
wow.
on purpose for a few days. And now after a few days of being like super insulin sensitive and just having everything that their body needs to like effectively use carbohydrate, then they will carb load up. So they'll like saturate those glycogen stores. And then the day of the competition, they're like topped off with glycogen. And then they'll have like gels and goos that they have to keep their glycogen stores topped off and to take advantage of those chemoreceptors that I mentioned earlier. So now they're just like keeping themselves like top the fuck off. And they have everything that they need in their bodies. Like the best athletes, they know exactly how to time their gels so that they are replenishing at the same rate that they're consuming. So that way they're not, overdoing it or underdoing it. They're just like perfect. And all I have to do is just maintain that effort. Like if you look at like cyclists, elite level cyclists, and like, I mean, they've got that down to a science.
They have to,
They know
right?
exactly how much they're burning. They know exactly how much they're consuming. It really is unbelievable. Yeah. There is something I wanted to read off. It's the analogy for carbohydrate, glycemic index and amount according to activity. But it's a more long-winded analogy. So I'll pull it up if you don't mind.
Yeah, pull it up. I would love that.
I think it's really going to help people like wrap their heads around this, and then we can return to creatine.
Yeah, we'll get into creatine for sure, and supplementation.
Nice. So this is an article that I wrote about carbohydrates. So the title was, "I love carbs almost as much as I hate carb phobia."
That's a great title.
Yeah. So carbohydrate, aka glucose, is the most efficient fuel source in your body for mental and physical performance. In order to get your carbs working for you, not against you, you want to match your carb intake and glycemic index to intensity and proximity to exercise, respectively. Here's a good analogy, to help you make sense of this. For optimal performance and to maintain our insulin sensitivity over time, we can think about carb intake at varying intensities, like the gears on a bike shifting to maintain our cadence. So gears are there to enable us, according to Cycling Weekly magazine, gears are there to enable us to maintain a comfortable pedaling speed or cadence regardless of the gradient or terrain, something that no one single gear is capable of. So, like gears on a bike, there is no single amount or type of carbohydrate for optimal performance. The idea is to adjust carb intake and glycemic index according to physical demand so we can keep our blood glucose level steady for X unit of time. Think of blood glucose like cadence. As intensity increases, demand increases, and we need to shift up in our gears, aka more carbs, more quickly, aka higher glycemic index, to maintain the most efficient cadence. Interestingly, this is crazy parallel. Interestingly, the most efficient cadence on a road bike is about 80 to 100 rotations per minute, and ideal blood glucose levels are stable at around 80 to 100 milligrams per deciliter. So it's a perfect analogy.
That's crazy.
Yeah. If we consume too many carbs with too high glycemic index, when demand for carbohydrate is low, all of a sudden our feet are spinning very, very quickly on that bike. Our cadence is super high, but we're not going anywhere. Everyone here has probably shifted on too high on their gears, and they're just like pedaling and the bike isn't moving and might even topple over.
Oh yeah.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, if we don't consume enough carbohydrate, so fasted training, for example, if we don't consume enough carbs and or consume carbs with a very low glycemic index when demand is high, our cadence plummets, and now it's really difficult to get those wheels turning, hypoglycemia. Either way, you won't be feeling your best or covering much distance in either scenario. So yeah, small introduction, but hopefully it keeps you from fearing carbs.
That's an amazing analogy.
Yeah.
That's also
it's a fun
wild,
one, right?
really fun one.
Yeah.
You can visualize it, and the fact that it's both 80 to 100 in both those examples is wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, yeah, and then if you shift to that really low gear, to that bigger, to that bigger gear, and like you're going from 0 trying to go to 100, right? It's like you have to like you're really fight it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if you're fasted and you're glycogen depleted, and I tell you, Drew, I want you to do the kind of activity that's going to help generate those increases in VO2 max. Like I want you to create a really high cardiovascular demand, but you're going to have to feel like you're working even harder than you're used to get the same benefit, which is okay from time to time. Like I mentioned in these athletes, right? They do this on purpose because their body, the way that you compensate, the way that you the kind of adaptive, like that is a really awesome adaptive stimulus. Your body's going to have to learn to work more efficiently and better under those conditions. So then under ideal conditions with enough carbohydrate, bro, you're a fucking rocket.
It's like wearing an oxygen restriction mask.
Yeah, exactly.
Training in that state with less oxygen,
And
you come back
in that
to full
example,
oxygen, this is easy.
So with those masks, there's a lot of debate over whether or not they can help support increases in VO2 max and cardiovascular performance. I think that there definitely is a lot to gain from them because number one is you're going to have better breathing dynamics. The anatomy and physiology of your breathing is going to improve. Your diaphragm is going to get stronger. You're going to increase your CO2 tolerance. So we get the urge to breathe not because oxygen is low, but because we accumulate carbon dioxide, which is acidic, gives the body the urge to breathe. And if you train under in a hypoxic environment, you're going to learn to, number one, scavenge oxygen better and use it more efficiently. Number two, we're going to see increases in your tolerance to CO2. So that's relevant. And then on top of that, if you actually look back at the VO2 max equation, the Fick equation, that A VO2 difference, you're going to increase that end of the Fick equation. You're going to increase the ability for your body to scavenge oxygen in blood and use it effectively and efficiently. So yes, exactly. We're training in unideal conditions to generate a super physiological and adaptive response, and then under ideal conditions, now we're like next fucking level.
I got this. This is easy.
Hey,
I haven't felt that this summer running here outside, dude, and that humidity, the heat.
That's a great way to increase VO2 max.
And then I did a race where the weather was 60 degrees and no humidity. I feel fantastic right now.
You simulate training under high heat. You simulate conditions as if you were at high altitude. So you see an increase in your oxygen carrying capacity. You increase your hemoglobin. So, and we're at. People say, we're at what's it called?
Flatland, yeah.
Flatland, sea level.
Sea level, yeah, there you go.
We're at sea level, right? How are you going to train for high altitude? Yeah, but if you train in the heat at sea level even, you're still going to see an increase in hemoglobin. A lot of elite athletes, what they do is they follow something called live high, train low. So they live at high altitudes because just living at high altitude, you're going to see an increase in your hemoglobin and oxygen carrying capacity as your body adapts.
Wow.
Right, under unideal conditions. So now you're just carrying more oxygen and delivering more oxygen. But then they train low because at low altitudes, they can totally max out, their performance.
Take advantage of that aspect.
They can take advantage of it, and they can just simply go harder and keep themselves at lactate threshold longer. And so it's I'm me, I'm a biohacker. I go nuts.
Yeah.
I'm seriously considering investing in a high altitude chamber for my bed.
I love that.
It's $5,000-$10,000 thing.
Wow.
And just
you sleep in it?
Yeah, you sleep in it because you're just increasing your oxygen carrying capacity and your hemoglobin while you sleep. But it doesn't lead to as you can imagine, especially for the first few months, your sleep is going to be fucking atrocious.
Yeah.
You know, because your heart rate's to compensate for a low oxygen environment, your heart rate's gonna go up. And now you're in a more sympathetic state, unideal for sleep, HRV's gonna plummet, you know.
I would love to see the HRV on that.
Yeah, but this next week I'm gonna be doing something called EBU. I forget what it stands for, but I'm going to this insane longevity clinic. It's called the Longevity Center in West Palm Beach.
Nice.
A couple buddies of mine own it. And I'm basically gonna have them filter my blood and hyperoxygenate my blood, and then there's like red and infrared light that are shining on it, like all this
on the blood.
They're basically like, imagine it's like an oil change for your blood. Like that's what I'm going to be getting. Whoa. And then a few days later,
they shine infrared light on the blood.
Imagine like all your blood comes out, it goes into this machine, all right? It like oxygenates the blood, it cleans up the blood, it removes like all the gunk, inflammation. Like at the end of the session, you have like this bag of like crap that you took out of your body, like this like yellow disgusting substance that you just like filtered out of your blood. So like it cleans up your blood, shines all kinds of lights on it, and then it goes back into your body. It comes out one arm and it goes back into the other arm.
Dude, you're gonna be bionic after this.
Yeah, I'm gonna be shooting a podcast with them about that plus heavy metals. I recently got my heavy metals chelated with them with this doctor. So I'm gonna be doing a podcast while this is happening. And then a few days later, something that they claim is that apparently after this session, you have 30% more blood oxygen, or you increase your, I don't know, your carrying capacity by 30%. It's some crazy metric. It's like way more effective than taking like beetroot powder or like, you know, any other supplements that we know can increase our VO2 max. And the point is that a few days later, I'm going to be going to North Carolina for a spearfishing trip with my dad to shoot wahoo, and incredible spearfishing experience. And this apparently is going to help me increase my dive time pretty significantly, you know, my free dive, my bottom time. So anyway, big tangent, but why don't we shift gears into some of the creatine stuff?
Yeah, let's talk about supplements. What are your, you know, top three? How do you feel about supplementation in general?
So look, I want to take you through two different top threes. I want to take you through my personal, like, if I could only choose 3 supplements, what would I take? And then like the top 3 that I'm most excited about right now that I just think are really cool.
Yes.
So every single day, the 3 supplements that I take, no matter what: creatine monohydrate, magnesium. I take a full spectrum supplement by Bioptimizers. It's called Magnesium Breakthrough. It has 7 different kinds with manganese and vitamin B6 to improve the bioavailability of that magnesium and supporting over 300 biological processes in your body. You know, you need more than just one type of magnesium. And our soil's depleted of it. I did a whole podcast on the people can tune into that. So magnesium, creatine, and then I would say electrolytes. You know, either a high quality salt or just an electrolyte mixture. Because I love to exercise, I'm outside a lot, I like to sweat, sauna, etc. Electrolytes are great.
Totally.
You know, our bodies are these like magnetic. Like if you, it's funny. I often compare the human body to like a bottle of Gatorade, because we're made of mostly water, glucose, and electrolytes. And I will make this. I draw this example often when I want to motivate someone to hydrate more. Because what happens if you leave a bottle of Gatorade open, sitting in the sun for a few hours, the water evaporates and they have this sticky, gooey mess. That's what happens in your body. You're mostly water and glucose. So if you're dehydrated, everything's more viscous. It's more difficult to fucking live your life and perform. And we know that just 2% dehydration in the brain can impair cognitive performance by up to 25%.
Wow.
Like, it's huge. You know?
How quickly can that 2% happen?
It depends on you know, the environment that you're, like if you're in a sauna, right, versus being somewhere that's very, very dry and very, very cool. It's totally different.
Yeah.
So it really just depends. But in Florida, Miami, dude, so fast.
Yeah. You're outside, you know, working out, training for an hour or so, sweating.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You know. So anyway, all that is to say that electrolytes, creatine, magnesium, my top 3, take them every single day. And then the 3 supplements that I'm most excited about, creatine is the only one that makes it on both lists. I love creatine, especially with the hype nowadays. Like, dude, it's almost like this has been like waiting to happen. Like it's been a huge supplement. You know, creatine has been a huge supplement in like the bodybuilding space, and the fitness space for a very long time, but now everyone's getting excited about it.
Yeah, and maybe you could touch on why, because at least from my perspective, it's like 10 years ago, it was this gym bro supplement. You wanted to get big, you wanted to put on muscle, take creatine. Girls were completely petrified of it. There were no girls taking creatine at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe talk about the change and what's happened and what it does other than that aspect of it.
Yeah, so I think the way I see it, it's like, creatine has worked so well for so long. You know, it's the second most studied and most effective ergogenic aid or work reducing aid after caffeine. It's the number 2. There's hundreds of thousands of studies.
That in itself is crazy.
You know? Yeah. Like there's so many fucking studies. You don't need more studies to prove how effective it is. Specifically creatine monohydrate. And at this point in time, what I know, the best source for creatine monohydrate, it's Creapure. It's a German lab. Most supplement companies white label Creapure. They just slap their brand name on it and they sell it. There's other kinds of creatine out there, but they're simply not as safe. They're not as effective. A lot of them will promise that they give you the same benefits with less bloating. Dude, just take the creatine monohydrate. Like, it's so fucking good, you know? But anyway, I'd say, yeah, like it was very popular among bodybuilders because it's so safe, it's so effective. You know, there's little to no side effects, and it does what it says it's going to do. You know, it gives the muscle more volume because it draws water to support the phosphagen system, the creatine phosphate, you know, system, phosphocreatine. There's different names. You need to draw water into the muscle, and that swelling does a couple of things. If you're a bodybuilder, it's going to make you look bigger, but it's also because there's that swelling. Following, you know, exercise stimulus, like following a training session, that swelling is going to create more damage. It's going to create a more anabolic environment, and that supports hypertrophy or muscle growth. So you're going to look fuller, and that fullness will generate more of this stimulus for growth. But on top of that, you have creatine. You have that number 1 substrate to generate ATP. So now you can actually go harder every set.
Train harder, which is
you train harder,
ripping more muscle.
There's more swelling, more gains. Yeah. So that's what we understood about creatine. That's why people were excited about it, specifically bodybuilders. But now there's like all this research on the influence that creatine has on like cognitive performance and preventing neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or delaying the onset of these, you know, diseases. Like there's so much good research that shows that anyone can benefit from this. Like, dude, I've been taking creatine pretty much every single day for the past maybe 10 years.
Wow.
And honestly, like for me, especially nowadays, I don't really take it to look or be bigger. Like I don't want to be bigger. I take it honestly because I fucking love the cognitive benefits of creatine, because the brain uses creatine as a substrate like any other cell in the body, but especially neurons. Like neurons need to generate ATP quickly. So creatine is fucking awesome for the neurons. Yeah, I mean, it's going to increase the strength propagation of nerve impulses. What we know about creatine, interestingly enough, is like creatine supplementation is most noticeable and most effective when there's some sort of like energy deficit in the brain or in the body. Like, for example, with sleep deprivation. Like, we know that if you're sleep deprived, you can take creatine, and within a few hours, you'll experience the benefits. So I want to emphasize this. It's especially valuable when there's some sort of energy deficit in the body. That's when you really get to see the power of creatine. Because otherwise, to actually experience the benefits, it takes time to, you know, load up your creatine stores. You know, there's like a loading phase. You typically have to take it for 2 to 4 weeks consistently every day, 5 to 10 grams, to like, you know, actually experience the benefits. But when you're sleep deprived, or when you're doing super high intensity exercise, that's when you really get to see the power of it. And you can experience that very, very quickly. So it's a pretty cool supplement.
It's super cool. And what would you say to maybe a girl? I've had this pushback from some girls who are like, I don't want to get big, right? Like, I think there's this idea that if you take creatine, you're just going to blow up. There's going to be water pulling into the muscles. You're going to put on this extra size that maybe some people don't want.
Yeah. So what I would say is like, at the end of the day, what's going to give you the most volume, especially as a girl, is going to be fat tissue. And if you saturate muscle with water, with creatine, whatever, glycogen, underneath that fat, yeah, you can generally see an increase in volume, right? Kind of pushes everything out. However, I think to get the best of both worlds, train consistently, make the most out of your training, maybe use creatine for that reason. Like if you get an improvement in body composition on both ends, like you lose fat and you gain muscle, you're going to look more toned. Creatine will help you do that, will help you perform at the level that you need and feel good to do the kind of activity that you need to do to allow that body composition to improve on both ends. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Like, yeah, you might, let's say, but even then, like it takes 30 days like to really load it up.
But I think some girls also are trying to, maybe say grow their booty, right? And creatine can help with that. And if you're not, training upper body religiously and really doing a program like that, you're probably not going to put on the extra added weight up here in muscle.
That's a great point. Let me put it like this. You can't spot reduce fat. Contrary to popular belief, you can't just choose where you want to lose fat. Like a lot of girls will say, oh my God, like I want to tone up my arms. Okay, like if you do dips and bicep curls, you're going to grow muscle. You're not going to burn fat on the arm. It doesn't work. You don't convert one for the other. It doesn't work that way. The first place that you put on fat is the last place that you lose it. So if you want to tone up your arms, you just have to maintain a consistent calorie deficit up until the point where now your body is going to lose fat in your arms. And there's genetic predispositions there. Like some girls will put on fat. Most girls will put it on, in their hips and in their butt, and then maybe in the arms, and then eventually like in the midsection and the face, right? It really just depends. There's genetic components there to consider. But if you establish a consistent calorie deficit long enough, you're going to get toned everywhere. However, you can't spot reduce fat, but you can decide where you want to put on muscle. So yeah, you can just train your butt, and now you're going to get this very lovely
shape
figure, hourglass figure, while you're losing fat everywhere else. So now there's more contrast, and you get more of this wonderful curvature. That we like so much because it is correlated to childbearing hips and survival. That's why we like it so much.
Going back to a primal aspect here.
Yeah, for sure.
It all goes back.
So give me the impression that you have childbearing hips, and I'm going to want to progenate, reproduce with you. No, but on a serious note, like you can't spot reduce fat, but you can decide where you want to put on muscle. So a lot of girls, hey, look, maybe do it for a period of time, right? Like use creatine to help you get the results more quickly and to feel better and more energized in the process. Before you know it, you'll be super toned. You'll have muscle where it counts, where you want it. You're going to look and feel great.
Yeah. And I think the cognitive benefit, I had never heard that 5 to 10 years ago about creatine.
Yeah. Bro, your neurons, your astrocytes, your glial cells, like use it as a substrate. For sure.
I want to hear a little bit about Andres' morning and night routine.
All right. Real quick before we get there, I want to mention that your body naturally produces creatine. Okay, we use, I believe, we create creatine with from 3 amino acids: arginine, glycine, and methionine. And we can generate endogenously about 1 to 2 to 2.5 grams a day, and then we get another 1 to 2 grams from food, assuming that you're consuming like red meat, fish.
Oh, so we're actually producing 1 to 2 grams just...
Yeah, you produce it from these amino acids, and then you get a few more grams from food. We know, for example, that folks that follow like a primarily plant-based or vegetarian diet, their endogenous production might be higher, but they're still not going to get as much from food. Like the net difference is lower than the average person following a normal diet. Totally. And we know that there seems to be, the science isn't completely 100% conclusive here, but we know that folks that aren't getting creatine from their diet or aren't supplementing creatine, they seem to have a higher incidence of depressive symptoms, brain fog, et cetera, because they don't have a substrate that is so essential for the brain to like feel good and do what it needs to do.
function
you know?
properly.
Yeah, like
And
it's a fuel source. Like fuel doesn't just mean in the gym. It means like your brain having what it needs just to maintain itself, to perform optimally. You know, and especially, like I said earlier, under very strenuous conditions. So like under high performance conditions. And I would consider like sleep deprivation, like most people don't get good sleep nowadays. Most people don't eat a very healthy diet. Most people are just chronically stressed. They will drink alcohol on the weekend, right? Like at a baseline, our population right now is not doing so hot.
Yeah.
You could consider that a relative deficit in energy. So when you take creatine, supplement it, beyond your endogenous production, beyond food, now you're like guaranteeing that your body has all the fuel that it needs, the substrate that it needs to perform optimally and to feel amazing in the process. So yeah, like, and if you're not feeling if outside of diet, there is evidence to suggest that if you are generally lower mood, if you're depressed, if you're feeling anxious, creatine can alleviate some of those symptoms. It gives the brain what it needs to like fix itself. Again, I don't want to jump to conclusions here, but there is a lot of good research supporting this.
Yeah, and I think, you know, no supplement is a fix-all, right? But I mean, that's pretty powerful that it has those effects. And I've heard from my personal experience of people who are vegans who start taking creatine, it's like an immediate notice in cognition and how they're feeling, their energy levels. So
yeah, it's great for cognition, for mental resilience, preventing neurodegenerative diseases, for mood. You know, there's so many of these benefits for sure. Yeah.
that's why we love it.
Yeah, and I mean, look, to be fair, folks on a plant-based, vegan, vegetarian diet, they're missing out on a few nutrients. Unless they're supplementing,
Yeah.
you know, they're missing out on creatine, they're missing out on B vitamins, they're missing out on a number of essential nutrients that are good for the brain. And so the deficit of all these nutrients can lead to cognitive issues or mood issues, disorders. So, you know, it's not just creatine, but creatine is definitely an important one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, my morning and night routine.
Let's get into it.
Want to know about that? I'll tell you what, man. I've done it all, as you can imagine. I've done everything, every biohack, everything, bro. Every supplement, everything. And I've learned that what works best for me and for most people, my clients, my friends, it's a minimalist approach. Like, what's the bare minimum that you can and should do every morning and every night to guarantee a better, higher quality, clearer day? What can you do to kind of like guarantee, you know, a better quality sleep, more efficient, more restorative, deeper sleep, right? So if we look at like the foundational biological levers for energy production, for mental clarity, like one of the most important things we need to really become experts in, everyone tuning into this podcast needs to become an expert in, because it's something you have to do every day, you might as well become an expert in it, is sleep, right? And sleep, circadian biology, the number one physiological stimulus that modulates your circadian rhythm is light exposure. So in the morning, the non-negotiable you have to get every fucking morning, no matter what, is light, sunlight, ideally. If you wake up before the sun, sun lamp, you know, or turn on the lights, like get light. Specifically that blue wavelength, which kicks up your endogenous cortisol, that stress hormone. We need a moderate amount of it for peak performance. So, you know, gets your cortisol up, gets your dopamine levels up. So in the morning, it's very important to feel focused, energized, productive. And then at night, you have to become an expert in down-regulating this cycle. So like, you know, you have your blue blockers, right? Like there's a reason why they're amber in color, because they're mimicking sunset, right? Like that amber color mimics the color you see in the sky when the sun is at a lower angle and sunlight has to cross through more of the atmosphere to get to the visible sky, meaning you're filtering out blue wavelengths. So in the absence of blue wavelengths, you have red, right? And now you have a stimulus for melatonin, sleep hormone accumulation, which is inversely related to cortisol. Cortisol levels start to drop, melatonin levels start to rise, your core body temperature starts to drop, which initiates deep sleep. And now, dude, you're primed for sleep. You know, so basically my non-negotiable in the morning and at night, it's the same thing, just two opposite ends of the spectrum. Managing light exposure. Obviously we have to mimic sunset, because what happens when the sun goes down nowadays in this modern world, modern life, we look at our phones, we turn on the fucking lights.
There are lights everywhere.
Yeah, so at least you're still, like, you can do whatever you need to do at night, be productive in some way, shape, or form. But now, the number one stimulus, you've got it under control. You're blocking the specific wavelength of light that leads to wakefulness, blue light. So those are two non-negotiables. Sunlight in the morning, within the first 30 minutes, 10 minutes sunlight, exposing, no sunglasses, exposing as much skin as possible to get that vitamin D, to get nitric oxide levels to increase, you know.
In the morning, is there a certain amount of time you'd recommend for someone?
In the light, at least 10 minutes. Yeah. And then into the evening.
Optimal 20 to 30?
Yeah, if you can afford it, if it makes sense for you. But at least 10, yeah. No sunglasses. Don't look directly at the sun, but allowing sunlight to come into the eye. And then at night, like, getting a high-quality pair of blue blockers and having them on. Ideally, putting them on when the sun starts coming down. You know, also putting the phone in like a night shift mode on the laptop. There's a program, a software called f.lux. So based on your geography, it'll shift your screen into like a dimmer, more like yellow-red setting.
Oh wow, is that an application?
Yeah, it's a free app. It's amazing.
F.lux?
It just slowly shifts, and it gets a lot more potent than like the night shift mode on the iPhone does. It like really gets dark, like red, orange in color, and it dims the light, so the photon density is lower as well. So that's like huge non-negotiable, right? You can do that anywhere in the world if you're traveling, right? Like another reason why being a minimalist is so important is like no matter what the conditions are, you can still do something effective. So that's number one. Number two, in the morning is I hydrate, 32 ounces of water, 1 serving of electrolyte. I like the Relight, R-E-L-Y-T-E brand, using Redmond Real Salt with 60 minerals in it. Relight electrolytes. Every once in a while, I'll use Element, LMNT. Fun fact is Element, they have a few varieties of their electrolyte. It's actually spicy in flavor. So there's a little bit of that capsaicin, which can increase your core body temperature ever so slightly. And I like that in the morning, just to kind of get going. It's pretty nice.
A little extra added juice there.
Yeah, so I'll do the 32 ounces of water. I have a very robust, very complete like water purification and filtration system in my house. Greenfield Water Solutions that I use. So clean water, 32 ounces, electrolyte, creatine every morning. And then the next thing that I do is I'll walk my dog to get the sunlight and fresh air and keep myself from looking at my phone, just engaging that panoramic view and peripheral visual cortex. It put me in a more parasympathetic but like good, happy state. And then the next thing I'll do is I'll make coffee with my neighbor or friend and, you know, just kind of get the brain working, get the juices flowing, have a conversation.
Are you putting anything in the coffee?
I will very often, more often than not, I'll drink Everyday Dose coffee, which has a blend of like functional mushrooms. So like lion's mane, I think has cordyceps, chaga. There's medium chain triglycerides there that readily convert to ketones. So great for just getting some of that mental energy. There is a little bit of collagen in there and essential amino acids. So yeah, you know, some good stuff in there. Yeah, that's pretty much. Some mornings I do red light therapy. Some mornings I get in my sauna. Some mornings I'll immediately go into the gym. You know, but these are like add-ons. The bare minimum: hydration, light, fresh air, and like visualizing even briefly what the ideal version of that day is going to look like. To program my subconscious to just get closer and closer and more motivated in ways that I can't even comprehend. Just getting me closer to that, you know, end goal by the end of the day. So kind of like visualize the day. Maybe I'll do a little meditation, a little bit of breath work. I'll take my supplements for the day. You know, according to what I have to do, I'll take a variety of different supplements and combination supplements.
And the most beautiful part about all that, it's kind of free.
Yeah,
They're all there.
Most of what I do is free. Sorry, my dog is just.
Oh, you're good.
And then at night, I have a whole routine. But I'll tell you what, I have a guide on sleep efficiency and how to get 100% sleep scores that we can add to the show notes as a PDF.
We'll link it in there.
It's everything that you need to do to leverage all these physiological mechanisms that improve sleep quality, improve sleep efficiency, and increase wakefulness in the morning the next day. So if you follow this to a T, you will get 100% sleep scores on demand.
You'd be proud of me. I'm in the
So-
90s every day now.
Awesome. So we'll link to this in the show notes.
Okay,
'Cause
beautiful.
I know we're running out of time and we have a few more things we want to cover.
Yeah.
So
I want to go back to where it all started. Where was the moment for you that changed everything on your health and wellness journey?
the moment that everything changed for me was, after taking Adderall for 10 years just to get by at school and have a self-esteem.
Why were you prescribed it?
Because I was diagnosed with ADD when I was really, really young. I was just like very distracted, couldn't focus. I mean, honestly, I just didn't give a fuck about school.
Yeah.
Like, I just like fishing and video games and being myself.
Like a normal kid.
Yeah, I've been like, I've just been always been a very intense guy, especially as a kid. I've always been really good at the things that genuinely interest me. The things that I don't want to do, like, dude, I will find a way not to fucking do them and avoid them. Like, I'm like an all or nothing personality. Nowadays, not so much. Nowadays, I have it more under control. But as a kid, school did not work for me at all. So I had to take, Adderall just to like acclimate, to this like environment.
System that we're put in?
Yeah. To kind of like tone down those behaviors and just get by. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the worst thing, but also the best thing that ever happened to me. But anyway, I grew up thinking I had a broken brain. And it wasn't until I discovered the concept of neuroplasticity that I realized I have some agency over the health and performance of my brain. And I became obsessed. So I did a neuroscience program while I was still in high school at the University of Miami over a summer break to kind of beef up my resume, but also to learn about neuroscience and neuroplasticity. And I had unlimited access to the gym, dining hall, social life, on campus. And I was sleeping because I wasn't on amphetamine, so I could actually sleep. And this was like the perfect environment to like, show my brain what it was capable of and my physical body. And dude, within a few months, I had gained 25 pounds of muscle. I felt confident for the first time in my life. And I was like, holy shit, like I can actually change the way that I feel with habits and lifestyle. Like, holy shit. So I went back to the University of Miami. I studied there, and I studied exactly the things that helped me. I studied exercise physiology, psychology, master's in physiology and nutrition. And then now for fun, years later, I'm doing a master's in neuroscience to return to like, the foundations of everything and just take it to that next level. But yeah, I became obsessed with like applied science and lifestyle change and nutrition and supplementation and biohacking to restore that agency and autonomy that I think all of us deserve, to live the life that we want.
Yeah.
And to show up as the best, highest performing, most authentic version of ourselves, right? And like all of us, we have everything that we've discussed, all the science, but all of us have that in common. Imagine what you can do in your life if you know how to like leverage these physiological mechanisms that are embedded in your DNA. Like imagine having the best relationship with those mechanisms where you know how they work, when they work, how to make the most of them, when you want to make the most of them. Like, dude, you are going to be limitless, And creatine, especially in this modern day and age, is the number one fucking supplement to help you fucking do that, period. Like, it's so effective, it's so safe, it works best under conditions of relative energy deficit. Most of us meet that condition, right? Modern life puts us in that condition. And so, bro, like, there you go.
And again, we said it earlier, it's like while we're here, we want to feel as good as we possibly can feel.
Yeah.
And I think everyone has that same vision for themselves.
Absolutely.
So what would you tell someone who's starting their health and wellness journey and maybe doesn't know what the first step to take is?
The first step to take, I say, is above all, be extremely curious, but also be extremely skeptical. So like you're always seeking new knowledge, seeking to learn, to actually understand how things work. Because as they say, it's give a man a fish, he eats for a night, teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. If you actually learn the underlying science by staying curious, you're going to have the chance to be successful for the rest of your life and also self-sufficient and autonomous in the process of enabling optimal health. So don't just take things for what they are at face value. When you see someone excited about it online, or your influencer or whatever, like learn the science and you're going to go much, much deeper, much, much further. And then being skeptical, because at the end of the day, look, science is always evolving and not everything you see is true. So be a scientist, run experiments, treat yourself like your own N of 1 clinical trial, but be responsible, ask for help, work with mentors, work with a great coach or or consultant or doctor, just have like a team of people that isn't just telling you what to do, but is showing you how it works and how it works for you specifically, and you're going to be way ahead of the curve. There's all this amazing substance out there that anyone can gain something from. Huberman podcast, Know Your Physio podcast, like there's endless content on Google, ChatGPT, right? But here's the thing, none of those creators, none of the content out there, all of that is missing one essential prerequisite for your optimal health journey, and it's your context. The content's out there, but your context isn't. So if you can learn about your context, your physiology, or work with someone that can help you make sense of your context and how the content fits into it, that's what's going to take you to that next level. Unless you do that, you're not going to be, you simply by definition, you're not going to have optimal health, because optimal health is totally personal to the individual. It's completely subjective. It's completely specific to that person, their lifestyle, their goals, their DNA.
What works for me might not work for you.
It will not. It's not that it might not. It will not work under ideal conditions for optimal health. If we want to standardize our well-being and performance, and then it's mediocre at best. So if you want to go to that next level over the top, you have to get to know your science and your context and your lifestyle and how it all fits into the big picture.
That's beautiful, bro. I love it. The last question I ask every guest on this podcast.
Yeah.
If you could tell the younger Andres one thing in this moment, what would it be? Another loaded question.
It's a great question. Look, man, I would say my story and my journey has really been like pain to purpose. And I wouldn't change anything. Anything. Nothing. I wouldn't change anything. Like, I went through a lot of shit when I quit Adderall, and I had insane withdrawal symptoms. And like, dude, I was like the biggest like nerd in class and like the biggest fucking loser. Like, I would, in recess, dude, I would hide behind a rock climbing wall the entire recess. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I was completely like isolated. I wouldn't raise my hand in class. I had no friends because I was so anxious. I was so in such a sympathetic state with these stimulants, with these amphetamines. My brain was so overactive that I would stutter. And so it made me even more anxious, and I wouldn't talk to anybody. I would never raise my hand, because that kind of attention on myself, drawing that much attention, it was like debilitating for me. If I had to get up in class to give a presentation or say anything, I would literally turn this color red. Like, it was debilitating for me. And bro, I would tell that version of myself back then, I would just reassure that version of myself, this is going to be part of the story that you're going to tell, and it's going to be, this is how you're going to get to empathize with the people that you will inevitably help later on in your life. Like, I would just kind of give myself that reassurance, because in those moments, I didn't understand that pain and suffering is something that we all deal with in some way, shape, or form. And if you actually face that and you make sense of it, it gives you the highest form of credibility in my book.
And use it.
Which is empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, dude, I went to school and I studied all this shit to fix myself originally. I knew inevitably I was going to be able to help other people with this knowledge and information, right? The physiology, psychology, nutrition, neuroscience. I knew, like, that's valuable information. The number one reason why I'm successful today is because I became obsessed selfishly. It takes being selfish to be selfless. And number two, because like I know what pain feels like. I want to help other people. It's empathy.
And you are helping people.
I'm successful because I can put myself in the shoes of the people that I'm helping. And because there's that element of empathy and there's more trust, now all of a sudden, everything that I say, now the theoretical knowledge that I have in my brain that I learned through schooling, a traditional setting, it holds more weight. You know what I mean? There's a really famous quote by Theodore Roosevelt, my favorite quote of all time. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Right?
Wow.
So it's like, I care that much about the people I'm helping because I've fucking been there, bro. If I had even more knowledge, theoretically, even more, another master's degree, a fucking PhD, but I had never gone through that fucking suffering, I'm just a smart guy that just knows shit. But I don't know how much change that can actually elicit and the depth that holds and how valuable it really is for someone.
Yeah.
I don't know suffering. So I wouldn't change anything, bro. And I would tell that version of myself, this is just going to be part of the story. You know, later on, part of the empathy.
That's powerful, man.
Yeah.
We all have suffering, and I know someone watching this will resonate with that deeply.
Yeah.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, brother.
What an honor and pleasure. Finally make this happen. Yeah, this is great.
Woo! Woo!